All right, so let's start talking about culture in the EMS classroom. And there's a lot of things that make all of us unique, and everybody has a different background, and that can only contribute to having a good and successful class. So some things that we're going to talk about in this PowerPoint, we want to recognize the dimensions of culture, what it means, describe how potential instructor biases can impact student outcomes, list ways to incorporate classroom strategies to embrace different students, describe how to develop a culturally sound classroom, commit to the needs to teach through a cultural lens, and create a learning environment that honors the values, beliefs, and characteristics of each student. So what does it mean to teach through a cultural lens? Culture itself is defined as the attitude, values, and behaviors of a particular group of individuals. So you probably belong to more than one culture, okay? Because this could be based off of your age, what generation are you in? It could be based off of your sexual orientation, your race, your hair color, your favorite sports team, or your favorite sport in general. A lot of different types of culture. So some examples that the textbook provided here were within one EMS classroom, you could have a multiracial gay Christian male sitting next to a Caucasian heterosexual agnostic female who grew up in poverty. So just taking a look at those examples can show you the various types of cultures, not all related to religion or ethnicity. So both of these students are in class to learn about the same topic and may have several shared values that attracted them to the profession, maybe a desire to help people, maybe they had something happen in their personal life that led them to EMS. However, it's unlikely that they view the world around them in the same way. And I think that's kind of what culture means at the end of the day to me, is everybody views the world differently. Even if we belong to the same types of groups, the same culture classes, we probably don't see the world the same way just because there are so many different experiences that have built us. And so teaching through that cultural lens really just means that you are considering this and taking everybody's culture, everybody's beliefs, everybody's experiences, and using that to build a good, stable, safe, open-minded classroom. So looking at a couple of different terms here, we have cultural competency versus cultural humility. So cultural competency means that an individual from outside a culture can, through intent and study, become competent in the belief system of a particular culture. And while that is achievable, it's probably impossible for us, thinking about the diverse populations that we are going to encounter, to become culturally competent in every single potential culture out there. It's just nearly impossible. So rather than try to become completely competent with all forms of culture that might exist in the classroom, it may be more effective for the instructor to develop cultural humility. And so cultural humility acknowledges that understanding of culture is a never-ending process of exploration and is defined as the ability to maintain an interpersonal stance that is other-oriented or open to others in relation to aspects of cultural identity that are most important to the person. So that means that even though I might not be competent, I may not understand every aspect of every culture that I encounter, I'm respectful of it. I'm not ethnocentric in the belief that my culture is better than everyone else's. I'm not forcing my values down anyone's throat. I am not being disrespectful or dismissive of someone's thoughts and feelings based off of their culture. And so that's what it means to have cultural humility. And that's really the best way to be in this classroom. So to develop cultural humility, you must commit to the following concepts. So the concept that your own ethnocentrism and background shape how they interact with students whose background is different from theirs. So you have to accept that your culture is different. And we're going to talk about that in just a second, how understanding that bias and things like that are there allows us to move past that. Teaching and learning occurs against the broad backdrop of society and all of its dominant and subordinate values, and a willingness and ability to use culturally aware strategies to promote learning to all. So that you are acknowledging that there are differences within the classroom, but that you're utilizing them to make the students stronger. And so we'll talk about a couple of ways that we can do that. So let's talk about bias. So bias is defined as an inclination of temperament or outlook, especially a personal and sometimes unreasoned judgment. So all humans are susceptible to having bias. This is a fact. You can't get around it. You are going to be biased in one way or another. So this could be against particular ethnicities, gender, ages, socioeconomic classes, religions, political persuasions, or sexual orientations, or really anything in general. Bias becomes dangerous when they are manifested as behaviors. So that means that while you're free to think however you want, you can't always express that. You can't always act on it. That's where it becomes dangerous. An instructor's behavior in the classroom can and will affect the probability of success for many students. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in detail as we, talk more about how we can influence the students. But an instructor who believes students can succeed makes that prospect more likely than one who believes they will fail. So if you're biased against a particular student, if you just feel like this student is a screw up, you don't agree with how they dress or how they look or how they act, or it could just be something that you can't put your finger on that rubs you the wrong way about this student, but you just have it dead set in your mind that they're never going to make anything of themselves, that they are going to fail the class, then chances are they're going to. They can, sometimes subconsciously detect how you are feeling and how the vibe that you're putting out against them, and it really does matter. So it's important that you stay open-minded and unbiased, again, recognizing that bias is there, but choosing not to act on it. So to deal with or reduce bias, one must first acknowledge its existence. So this starts with performing a critical self-reflection and recognizing one's own personal bias as a way to begin to reduce them, and challenge your students to do the same. All right, you understand that not everybody is going to get along. There are going to be people that you work with, that you come into contact with, who you have great relationships with, and then there are going to be people that you have strenuous or strained relationships with. That's normal. It is important that you recognize what it is about these people that you maybe don't like or that you're having a hard time accepting, so that you can choose to move forward with that, so that you do not have a biased classroom. So how many ways can a group of students be dissimilar? All right, so this is why it's so important that we cannot just group people into one lump. All right, so we can't say that everyone who is age 20 to 25 goes in one category, because they could be dissimilar in other ways. We can't put everyone who is female in one category, because they're going to be dissimilar in other ways. We can't put everyone from Generation X or Generation Z in one category, because again, they're going to be dissimilar in other ways. So how many ways could a particular group of students be dissimilar? So just a few things for you to consider. Age, their appearance, and that could be hair length, hygiene, tattoos, piercing, style of dress, disorders, whether they're physical, emotional, psychological, or psychiatric, gender identification, generational learning ability, language ability, marital status, parenting, political views, race and ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic class. So those are a lot of things that can make people different. And so that's why it's very important that we avoid stereotyping people into one category and saying, okay, well, I have 10 teenagers in this class. So we would assume those are 17, 18 years old, maybe 19. So I have, 10 teenagers in here, and that makes up the majority of my class. So now I am going to tailor my classroom to that type of student, and everybody else is just going to have to get on board with it. And so when you do that, you are actually stereotyping, because you're assuming that all of these students are going to learn the same way, and they very well might not, because of those other ways that they could be dissimilar. So each student is an individual and has their own individual needs, and we should never assume that one group of apparently similar students will learn the same way. Rather, you should present your information in a way that you feel teaches in all domains and prepare to offer additional assistance as needed. I will tell you guys that right now I'm in a situation that I've never been before with COVID-19, and that is teaching all online. So while I did start my first hybrid EMT class earlier this semester, and I was kind of getting in the groove with that, those students signed up to do online learning. And now, moving into all of these EMT classes having to be online, it's very difficult for some of them because that's not what they signed up for, and that's not how they learn best. And I can't teach in all domains. I'm doing my best to provide, these recorded PowerPoints, and I'm doing check-in videos with them, and I'm giving them other types of, example videos for running scenarios and skills and things like that. But I can't do everything that I would do in a classroom. I just can't. And so that's very difficult to not be able to teach in all of those domains and not be able to help students the way that I would in a classroom. And so, we'll be making up for lost time once we get back together. But that's just a few examples. So it's best for us to embrace diversity, and instead of ignoring our differences amongst students, we should utilize them. So for example, an instructor may have students from a rural agricultural community who could directly speak to the hazards of farm machinery, and students with medical military experience could speak to the provision of care in those types of environments. So these are very unique experiences that can help make the material more relevant for the entire class. So do not discredit these students. Give them the opportunity to share that with the class as a whole if they want to, or to provide some of that information. It's valuable information that is only going to enrich the class. So how can we create a safe classroom climate? We should be aware, so nothing should be assumed. We should allow students to explain who they are and how they want to be identified, and that doesn't have to just be on the basis of gender or sexual orientation. That's everything. How would you like to be identified, and into what categories or no categories? With terminology, if it's necessary to categorize, ask which labels are comfortable or preferable. So for example, Asian Americans may not want to be referred to as Oriental. Spotlighting, we should never force a student to be the spokesperson for any group, or if you have a student who says, hey, I absolutely, am petrified, terrified of being called on in class, respect that. Knowledge, get to know your students, because that is how you are going to build on this and be able to know what those triggers are, to be able to know what they prefer, what they find offensive. I have had several Muslim students over the years coming through EMT mostly on their way to PA school. But for the very first time, I've recently encountered a student who asked me that because of that culture, that he did not want to be partnered with a female, that he did not feel comfortable touching her for patient assessment. And he let me know that on the very first day of class, so that there was no opportunity to be awkward or for him to have to get up and explain himself in front of the class and feel uncomfortable. He pulled me to the side. He told me that, and we made those arrangements. And so now I know that, and I won't put him in that situation. So getting to know your students, very important. Lead by example. Whatever behavior you want your students to display, you should display that for yourself. So being professional, being knowledgeable, being competent, confident in all areas. Looking at the environment, making sure that you remember to be respectful. So what's humorous to some may be hurtful to others. And then acceptance. So thinking about those cultural things that we learned in EMT class and paramedic class, things like eye contact and shaking hands that may be offensive in some cultures. So understanding, again, going back to my student who did not want to work with a female student, that's okay. Understand what they're comfortable with and making accommodations to avoid that. So that's going to wrap up this culture talk. So if you guys have any questions about this, then please feel free to reach out and let me know, and I will catch you in the next PowerPoint.